Good afternoon or good evening, and welcome to HR Huddle. Today is the last Monday in January. My, how the month slipped by. Today, it is Renee Moelders, and I am Samantha Mansfield. We are both consultants with Convergence Coaching, and we're thrilled to get to be the ones doing today's session. What we wanted to talk about today, especially is, we're heading into a time of year that a lot of our colleagues can be very heads down. We can get real transactional in our interactions with each other. Is we wanted to talk about this whole concept of building relationships and how important that is. And Gartner just did a release of top trends and things for HR professionals to pay attention to for 2025. And one of the ones that they spoke about is loneliness and how loneliness really can impact productivity, retention, or the inability to retain talent. And we also have had an awful lot of conversations when it comes to business development and adding additional services and building deeper relationships with clients. And so all of this really does tie around this concept of being able to effectively build relationships. And where that might seem natural, it can be a challenge when we are so incredibly busy or we don't work in the same physical locations. And we certainly work with a lot of young talent here at Convergence Coaching. And these are questions that they ask. How can I better do outreach and get to know people? And so we just thought this would be a nice topic, especially as HR professionals, that you can keep your eye out. You can offer some of these tips and help those around you be able to build lasting quality relationships that make it more fulfilling for them to do their work and get to know the people, clients, as well as internal in their organization. Renee, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so you talked about some of the barriers, Samantha, which are people are busy and also that people are not always in the same location. Another barrier I really do believe is some people are good at this naturally and some people aren't. And we don't often teach how to do it. We assume that people know how to build relationships. We assume that they know that it's important. When they get to like experienced manager, senior manager level, then we start saying to them, oh yeah, relationships, if we're doing the right thing by them and they're on the partner path, we'll say, you need to now go build relationships with the partners. But I just wonder about talking about it earlier. And really, I do wonder about creating a kind of accountability around relationship building. Almost like, Sam, I'm wondering about a time code. And I hate time, we hate talking about time at Convergence, but let's be old fashioned for a second and old school and say we would have a time code and you need to put at least, I don't know, an hour of relationship building time on your timesheet once a week and have a conversation with your coach about who are you building relationships with and how are you approaching it? Because I do know my coachees, like for instance, we're doing some Rainmaker coaching right now. And I have a particular gentleman who this is just not natural to him. He's a super technical guy. He's nice, don't get me wrong. And he comes to the call and he tells me about himself, but we don't do a lot, the two of us, in learning about each other. And then, he very openly said to me, I actually don't know what to do next with some of these contacts that I'm building. I'm making friends with people, but then how do I keep the relationship alive? I can't just reach out once a month and say, hey, how are you? So what could I try? And so we had to talk through some strategies of, well, you could invite the person, like send them a coffee gift card and chat with each other. You could send them a little like tchotchke with your logo on it. And you could, reach out with a certain type of article and say, let's talk about this. I think this applies to you and your clients. Like just mixing it up and strategies. And then also, how do you make friends with that person and take the friendship deeper? Samantha, he didn't know how to do that. Mm-hmm. So I just think that's interesting. Like we had to strategize together. And so I think that's the other way I would approach it from is some people just really aren't good at this and they need strategies and skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so what are some of those things that get in the way? One piece is perhaps a lack of confidence. Because when you talk about getting to know other people in the firm or clients, what I do hear from some of the colleagues and team members that we talk to is that they get worried about, well, why would they want to take the time to talk to me? And so it's a feeling of they're busy. If I talk to them, it's somehow a perceived waste of time. So I agree with you. I'm not big on the timesheet, but maybe the communication that we give is that taking the time to build a relationship is not wasted time. So I was at a conference in December, and this is one of the things we were talking about too, that we can get, especially in peak seasons, we can get extremely transactional in our interaction with each other and we don't get curious. And so maybe set a goal of ask two non-work or project related questions in your interaction with a team member that you're working with or a client that you're working with, because there's so much that we can start to learn. And then, like you just said, how we can use that is one, we could be learning something either about the client or about the firm, but it also can just start to boost our feelings of being connected to the firm, give us some more enjoyment in what we're doing, because now I actually have a feeling like I'm relating to some of the people, again, internal and externally within the organization. And so having that conversation that one, people do want to be inquired about. People love talking about themselves. So don't feel like somebody doesn't want to answer that question or do that. They actually will feel commonly flattered or valued if you do go ahead and ask about them, right? So there's that. And then also reinforcing with them that this is not wasted time. Now, we can't spend the entire hour talking about those kinds of things. We measure it, but maybe you set that goal of every interaction, ask two non-project or work related questions so that we start practicing that and start making those connections. So there was one thing that really hit me is that not letting that barrier get in their minds of people thinking they don't want to have that kind of conversation with you.
I love that. And also giving them some things to try, Samantha. So, not assuming that they will know how to go deeper or how to like explore a relationship with a client or a contact at a client, but giving them some things to try. And then what about if at the beginning of the tax department meeting, you say, "Hey, I'm interested to hear from one of you here around the table. What's something new you've learned about a client lately?" So,
Mhm.
like almost success stories, figuring out a way to have those success stories come through and say, and really like compliment a staff person, for instance, who has the confidence to raise their hand and says, I learned that, our client over at such and such manufacturing really loves to sing in a chorus. And I didn't know that about her, and then everybody's like, oh, interesting. I wonder what I could find out. Almost like it becomes competitive, or definitely it becomes you realize this is real, that we are interested in building relationships and not just getting the client work done, like believing us by having some of those successes. I do like that. um, well, we teach strategies in our senior and supervisor program around communication. We have a whole session on communication, and we go around the pitfalls of communication, but we also do talk about this idea of building rapport and play a game around building rapport. Sam, we do that fun game where we say, find 15 things that you have in common. And you probably can't sit with a client or with a new team member and have 10 minutes and find 15 things. But you could try to find, like you could say to the staff person, see if you can find one or two things that you have in common with that other person, and kind of make it a game that we're going to, again, come back and talk about it.
Yes. Well, and when we were teaching a session like that recently, we had a few participants who had wonderful suggestions because they said, I don't feel that creative to come up with these things. And so there were 3 to 5 games that were mentioned of cards that give you ideas of questions that you could ask people. And so a few of them were earmarking those in their Amazon shopping cart when they were talking to us. So, for folks that feel like, oh, this feels so awkward and I feel like I don't come up with that interesting question. You could even give them ideas, or maybe HR gets a set of those cards and throws it out and says, who can go learn this about a coworker today? Something like that, where it just mixes it up. It reminds us that we're all humans and that we need a little outlet. It's not just about being a machine and getting all of that work done, but really engaging with each other. So that could be an idea that you could do too, for any of maybe your team leads, or again, some people on your teams that are feeling as though I am not creative and I do not come up with those questions very well. You could support them and help them do it. And then they may be surprised at how that starts to spin off and create additional ideas from there.
Yeah, I like that, Samantha. Well, the other thing that we say in the senior program is we're so focused sometimes as human beings on the things that are different about one another. It's almost like it puts this big barrier between us. And so instead, flipping it a little bit and saying, I'm going to look for things in common. I'm going to assume that with every person, I can find at least one thing, almost like a game, and so like reprogramming a little bit to wanting to be able to connect with people versus like put them in a category that's different from me. And I don't know why we do that as humans. It's a weird behavior that we have, but trying to change that. And I think a lot of firms are good at that. They have wonderful communities. They have, people are related to each other. Sometimes people get left out of those communities. So like thinking about internally, who are the people who aren't as connected or maybe who are feeling a little bit lonely, are remote people. I think commonly we hear from them that they feel lonely, like they aren't being pulled into those communities as much as they could be, or is anyone thinking about them, reaching out to them, playing the game with them? Like I worry sometimes about the remote people.
Well, and there's been a number of observations that when we're meeting through the video conferencing, that for some reason we do focus on the time a little more. And so trying to be efficient in the conversation and not allowing the time to be able to connect. And so if you are leading a meeting, lead by example and budget in. Don't pack your agenda so tight that there isn't any kind of time to spend, who knows, 3 to 5 minutes at the beginning of a meeting about asking some of these social questions. I know one of my favorites that I will tend to ask is, who's binge watched, or it's on a Monday, what'd you binge watch over the weekend? Or my friends are, who's listening to an interesting podcast, which I just discovered one over the weekend. And, those kinds of things, because it's those little pieces that will support what you just said, Renee, that's where we can start finding out and say, oh, I didn't know Renee does that. Or, oh, Sarah's a big reader, or Caroline's an amazing crafter, and I've been wanting to learn how to knit, or so many different things. But we just don't allow ourselves to end up sharing that because it feels out of place. And so we need somebody to open the conversation to enable us to start building those relationships. And so if you do lead those meetings, or again, give these ideas to those who start and open up meetings, because it starts the dialogue and it really gives us the opportunity to use our meeting time, not just to hammer through the business, but to really get to know each other. And that it reinforces what I said a few minutes ago, which is it's not a waste of time. This is part of what we want to do. And there's value in us connecting as a team.
Yeah. And I really think, as you're saying that it should be a discipline that, if this is important to you at your firm, if you want your people to be more connected to one another, if you want them to be more connected to your clients or your referral sources or in the networking community, and you want them really to practice this, that we could have a discipline of every meeting, we spend 5 minutes doing something personal at the beginning. And that could be, depending on the size of the group, going around and saying one thing that we're grateful for, or which helps you learn about people and what's happening in their life. Or it could be, you know, tell us something fun that you did this weekend, or, you know, and you do have to manage the time. I get that, but 5 minutes out of 60 or 3 minutes out of 30. And we just say, like, this is how we're going to start our meetings for a while, just to practice this and to hone in on this idea of we value relationships. So we want to practice building relationships and learning about each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you just said there too really starts to affect the mindset. Because where you were saying that, you know, with building the relationship, that, or the gratitude journal, I think is what you were using as an example too. It helps us all to really focus on our mindset or our mental attitude during especially these peak times, and not just peak times. By no means, you know, we all could use that reminder of things to be grateful for, or what to celebrate. And sometimes it people get nervous, or maybe feel anxious about saying what they're happy about, that it more feels like it's okay to complain about something, but maybe it feels like I'm bragging if I want to say this is going really great for me right now. But we want to celebrate people's successes, joys, uh, you know, praise moments that they have. And so I love that, because when we have those moments, we can leave a conversation just feeling lighter and feeling a little excited, and maybe realizing, hey, there's some really great things going on, and I'm going to go follow up with that person and see how that's progressing, or whatever it might be. And again, just a couple weeks ago, we were doing a session and we asked for, share your updates with us. What's been going on since we last saw you? And somebody didn't speak up, but then later admitted, well, I passed the CPA exam, and we all wanted to celebrate that with this person. So, you know, when we hear things like that, you know, shouting it from the rooftops, and letting people know that that's the kind of thing we'd love to celebrate with you, and you don't have to keep that to yourself.
Yeah. And my chorus does it, Samantha. We call it good news.
Mhm.
And so someone stands up at the front, and that's, 65 people. So, but it takes us probably 5 minutes, because you just shout it out, and it's not meant to be a treatise. It's not like minutes, but it's, here's that, my kid accomplished something. I had a great weekend. I got to reconnect with someone in my life that I care about. It does give you then, like I catch that person on the break, maybe one of them, and say, hey, I didn't know you had a long distance relationship with someone in California. And it's a starting point for a conversation. Mm-hmm. So it is like, and it can go pretty fast, 5 minutes, and 60 people. Not everybody says something, but maybe 15 people jump in and share some of their good news. So,
well, and one other thing I'd like to add is a cautionary note, because sometimes I have heard leaders say, okay, well, I can do this. But when they reflect on it, they realize those that they perceive to be introverts, they're thinking, well, but it's not as important to do this with the introverts. And I want to say that's not accurate. Introverts can get lonely too. And so careful about that. If you perceive there are introverts on the team and think, well, they really prefer to be left alone and to not speak up, that's actually not the case at all. Just their communication style is going to be different, as well as they're going to be a little more tired after some real social interaction. But that does not mean that they don't value it, that it doesn't make them feel seen or appreciated, and that they don't want to get to know people. So that's another tidbit that I would watch for, is just making sure those that you either know are introverts or that you perceive to be, that we don't say, well, it's not as important to do that with them. Please lead them into that, because they can get lonely and have some of those negative effects as well.
Yes. And it all connects back to Gallup says, one of their engagement questions, do I have a friend at work?
Yeah.
And so we do, like, the more our people are connected to one another or connected into their leader, the more likely they are to stay, and the more likely they are to talk about the things that are going well and also not going well. So, yeah, I mean, just lots of value in this building relationships, which I think we've decided in this HR huddle, Samantha, takes skill building. Some people are going to do it really naturally and they are like masters at it. And that's so interesting with the Rainmaker coaching that I'm doing, because I have these two guys, and one of them is like, he does it in his sleep. Like, it's no problem for him. Now he has other things that he's working on. And for the other gentleman, it's like, it's not as natural. He's trying to figure out what's an approach that feels good to him, but also locks that referral source, in this case, in, and draws them closer to him. So we are going to have to teach people these skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And different techniques for remote and in person, and they both can take place. The in person may feel more natural, but remote is 100% possible. And it's just different techniques and being
Yeah.
intentional about making that effort.
For sure. Yes. Awesome.
Well, I think we've hit our time, so we appreciate you joining us for this. We'd love to see any comments or hear any feedback on how you're starting to get people building relationships. Love to hear it. And we will see you next week at our HR Huddle. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.